Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here to Darwin College for our very timely and undoubtedly important discussion of the question of North Korea, human rights, security and beyond. My name is John Nilsson Wright. For those of you who don't know me, I am the head of the Japan and Korea's program at the Center for Geopolitics here at Cambridge University. I'm also a faculty member at the Faculty of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies. And this is one of a series of events we've been running on Korean geopolitical issues. It's a particular pleasure to welcome quite a large delegation from the Korean Institute for National Unification. KINU was established in 1991 by the South Korean government. Its role is to act, if you like, as a think tank for research and inquiries into the question of unification. And obviously that involves a whole range of critical issues to do with domestic politics, to do with the nature of leadership in the DPRK, and obviously the question of the security challenge that North Korea poses to the international community. And I'm sure no one here needs to be reminded of just how great the deal, how much international concern there is at present about the challenge that the DPRK represents, not just on the Korean Peninsula, but of course on the back of last autumn's agreement between Pyongyang and Moscow to establish a new security partnership. There is a great deal of concern about the nature of the threat that the DPRK represents. Also, of course, the presence of some 10,000 North Korean troops in Russia engaging in conflict with the forces of Ukraine. All of this has dramatically, I think, raised the question of how best to deal with the challenge of North Korea. This is also a government which, under the leadership of Kim Jong-un, has become much more assertive in the way it talks about its own security priorities and its relationship with its immediate neighbor, with South Korea. We've seen that in the form of the launch of trash balloons. Some weeks ago, the launch of a long-range ballistic missile, further demonstration that North Korea continues to make progress in developing its strategic capabilities. We've seen it in the codification of North Korea's nuclear doctrine within its constitution. We've seen it also in the form of a reinforcement of fortifications on the DMZ. And we've also seen an activism on the part of the North Koreans, not just in Europe, but also even in the Middle East with support provided to countries such as Iran. Having said all of that, we also know from reports from defectors from the DPRK that all is not necessarily stable domestically in the DPRK. And some of those defectives have suggested that the regime, despite its belligerence and its very vocal political statements, is not necessarily perhaps as strong as it might appear in terms of those statements. But domestic instability is, of course, not only confined to the DPRK. For countries that are confronting the challenge of North Korea, arguably at the moment there are great political changes taking place and vulnerabilities, both in South Korea and in Japan, that raise questions about the capacity of neighboring states to deal with the challenge of the DPRK. In South Korea, President Yoon's popularity has been declining on the back of a series of political controversies. In Japan, we now have, for the first time in 15 years, a minority government struggling to put together a coalition that will allow it to stay in office. And of course, we all know what happened in the United States just a few weeks ago, raising really important questions about the durability of America's alliance partnership with its most important Northeast Asian allies, South Korea and Japan. If that weren't enough in terms of instability and question marks about the future, international institutions seem increasingly less capable, less well prepared to deal with the challenge of the DPRK. We saw a decision by Russia, for example, some months ago to veto the UN commitment to maintaining an established panel of experts to provide expert guidance and recommendations on how to deal with the DPRK. And there are, I think, important questions about the ability of the international community to restrain North Korea in its acts of belligerence. A little bit of good news in the midst of all of this uncertainty. European countries are beginning to reach out to the DPRK. Sweden has reopened its embassy in Pyongyang. There are other countries which are also seeking to establish dialogue and contact. But the landscape, if you like, of international politics at the moment where North Korea is concerned remains, I think, confused to say the least, and full of challenges and imminent dangers. For today's discussion, we have a really valuable and interesting panel of expert speakers. We will begin with an address by the president of KINU, Kim Chun-sik, who is Emeritus Professor at Sehwan University, has been a visiting professor of Ewha University, a senior researcher at the Institute for Peace and Unification Studies at Seoul National University, and also has served very importantly as Vice Minister of Unification from 2011 to 2013. We will then, after his brief remarks, have two presentations from colleagues from KINU, E.Q. Chang, who's the Director of the Human Rights Division, and Kim Soo-am, an Emeritus Research Fellow, also at KINU. This will provide a basis for talking about the question of the DPRK's leadership, and in particular what the International Criminal Court might be able and minded to do to deal with the question of Kim Jong-un and his domestic policies, but also some of those international provocations. In response to those presentations, we have three distinguished European colleagues, academics and policy practitioners. Retired Ambassador John Everard, who has been here on a number of occasions and I think will be known to members of the audience, who served in the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office for 27 years. Most importantly, for the purposes of our discussion, was ambassador to the DPRK from 2006 to 2008. Next to him, my old friend, Professor Ramon Pacheco Pardo, based at King's College London, a prolific writer on Korean issues. His latest book, it's hard to keep track sometimes, Korea, A New History of South and North Korea, is that correct? That's the latest version. But he is an indefatigable communicator about all things to do with both North and South Korea. Ramon, it's a great pleasure to see you here again. Welcome. And then last but not least, Professor Kevin Gray, Professor of International Relations at the School of Global Studies at the University of Sussex. His research interests focus on political economy with a regional focus on East Asia, and has just had a very interesting workshop at the University of Sussex looking at some of the issues that we will be discussing today. Thank you for coming all of that way from Sussex. We very much look forward to your remarks. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand the podium over to the president of KINU for his opening remarks.
Can I just make an announcement?
Yes, please.
So I'm the interpreter, guys. Hello. Basically, just to save time, because it's going to take twice as long if I translate both ways. So for the English, I'll be in the background. But if you do need it, then I can translate to Korean. But otherwise, I'll be doing the interpreting from Korean to English only at the moment. So just wanted to let you know. 그리고 또 이제 그 통역 관련돼서 이제 한국어에서 영어, 한국말로 둘 다 하면은 시간이 너무 오래 걸리기 때문에 영어에서 한국말 하는 거는 그냥 제 백그라운드에서 대기를 하고 있겠고, 그래도 혹시 필요하시면 말해주세요. 근데 주로 다 이제 그 한국어에서 영어로 하실 때 그때 제가 이제 들어오도록 하겠습니다.
Good morning, everyone. It is a great pleasure to see the co-hosting of the seminar on the security of the Korean Peninsula and North Korean human rights between the renowned Center for Geopolitics, University of Cambridge, and the Human Rights Research Center of the Korea Institute for National Unification. I would like to extend my warm gratitude to Director John Nielsen Wright, professors, and the audience for taking the time to participate in today's seminar. Since 1996, Korea Institute for National Unification published the white paper on North Korean human rights, informing the international community of the human rights situation in North Korea. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the UN COI report release. In its 2014 report, the COI concluded that crimes against humanity had been committed in North Korea, and it issued numerous recommendations to the North Korean authorities to improve human rights. However, North Korea has completely ignored such recommendations. Instead, since the onset of COVID-19 in 2020, North Korea has fully controlled the daily lives of the residents. North Korean defectors have testified that residents exposed to South Korean culture are subjected to public executions. The North Korean regime perceives the belief among North Korean residents that North and South Koreans share kinship and should unite as a threat of its stability. Furthermore, North Korea has completed nuclear weapons and missiles, and openly declares that South Korea is a target they should destroy with nuclear weapons. South Korea and the international community must rigorously deter North Korea's nuclear ambitions and pursue complete denuclearization of North Korea. North Korea even sent its young people to the battlefield in Ukraine to serve the regime's interests. Such involvement violates North Korean residents' right to life and exacerbates instability both on the Korean Peninsula and Europe. The Republic of Korea pursues unification based on liberal democracy rooted in the right to self-determination of the Korean people. Ultimately, both North and South Koreans should exercise their right to self-determination, leading to a unified nation where freedom, human rights, and universal values are realized. To this end, North Korean residents must be able to freely express their will. I hope today's seminar will contribute greatly to the peace and unification of the Korean Peninsula and the improvement of human rights in North Korea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Kim. Let me now invite our speakers from Kinu to begin their presentations. So perhaps shall we start here?
Yeah.
Thank you.
예, 반갑습니다. 전 그 키누로 온 이렇게 근무하고 있는 김수함입니다.
So yeah, nice to meet you all. I'm Suam Kim. I'm the Emeritus Research Fellow at the KINU, Korean National Institution of Unification.
통역 때문에 순차 통역 때문에 시간이 많지 않기 때문에 간략하게 그 핵심 내용 중심으로 말씀드리고 Q&A에서 궁금한 사항을 풀어나가도록 하겠습니다.
Yeah, because we've got an interpretation in the middle, so just to save time, I'm gonna summarize it, and then I'll be taking Q&A. I think that's the best way to go forward.
2013년 UN 휴먼 라이츠 카운슬에서 북한 인권 관련 결의안이 채택됐는데 그 결의안에서 북한의 어떤 그 인권 침해가 full accountability에 해당되는지를 규명하는 핵심 맨데이트를 가진 커미션 오브 인쿼리가 구성되었습니다.
So in the UN in 2013, there has been a resolution against North Korea about the human rights issues.
그 COI가 1년간 활동을 해서 2014년 2월에 보고서를 제출했는데 그 보고서에서 북한 내에서 조직적이고 광범위하며 중대한 인권 침해가 이루어지고 있다고 평가했습니다.
So in 2014, the Commission of Inquiry stated that systematic, widespread, and gross human rights violation have been and are committed in North Korea.
그러한 그 대규모 인권 침해가 그 ICC 설립 근거인 로마 스태튜트의 4대 범죄 중 하나인 Crimes Against Humanity를 구성한다고 판단하였습니다.
So this level of human rights violation is actually part of the biggest four crime in the ICC, which is crimes against humanity.
그런데 안타깝게도 그 2014년 2월 보고서 발표 이후 다양한 이 증언이나 이런 이 자료를 통해서 분석할 때 북한 내에서 여전히 Crimes Against Humanity에 이를 정도의 그 대규모 인권 침해 행위가 지속되고 있는 것으로 국제사회는 공통적으로 평가하고 있습니다.
Unfortunately, since this report has come out in February 2014, through the analysis of various evidence and also data, as well as witness statements, unfortunately, it looks like there is a consensus within the international community that this violation is keep on continuing in North Korea.
그러면 이렇게 2014년 보고서 이후에 이런 그 대규모 인권 침해가 지속되고 있는 요인은 무엇일까요?
So what is the reason of this continuation of violation of human rights in North Korea since the 2014?
2020년을 중심으로 특히 김정은에 대한 그 개인 숭배와 우상화가 이 전폭적으로 진행되고 있는데 북한 주민들이 인권에 대한 인식을 자각하고 권리를 요구하게 된다면 이러한 그 개인 숭배와 우상화는 결정적인 위협을 받게 되겠죠.
So in 2020, since 2020, there has been a lot of like glorification and idolization of Kim Jong-un, and overall, but however, the residents in North Korea, they have been more aware about human rights, and they started to demand for rights, and that has been the biggest impediment to this idolization process.
북한은 그 인권은 곧 국권이다. 이런 어떤 논리 아래 그 주권을 상실하면 인권 자체가 보장되지 못한다는 논리 아래 인권 문제와 이 체제 안보 문제를 연계시켜서 북한 주민의 그 사회 통제를 정당화하고 있습니다.
And North Korea has always been saying human rights is the nation's sovereignty, and that means no sovereignty, no human rights, and that is the ideal way for North Korea to control have a social control in terms of human rights and also the continuation of the regime.
코로나19에 대한 대응은 북한은 국경을 봉쇄하고 내부적으로도 엄청난 이동을 차단하는 봉쇄적인 정책으로 대응해 왔는데 이런 이 코로나19를 봉쇄 정책으로 대응하는 이런 상황을 오히려 역으로 북한 주민을 통제하는 그 기제로 활용하는 그런 측면이 있습니다.
And during the COVID-19, the response was to close the borders and also control or isolate the internal movement, and that was a strategy. However, using that strategy, that was actually used inadvertently to control, and it became a tool of control of those people.
그 최근에 이제 김정은이 이제 그 남북 관계를 동질 관계가 아닌 교전 중인 두 개의 적대 국가로 규정하면서 정책 전환을 시도하고 있는데 이러한 그 두 적대 관계론이 이러한 북한 주민을 통제하는 중요한 기제로 작용할 가능성이 높습니다.
And also recently, Kim Jong-un has stated that the both countries, South and North Korea, are now adversaries. So in a hostile relationship between two countries, and through that try to have a change of political direction, and that became like that became also like the catalyst of controlling the North Korean residents.
그 세계 인권 선언과 주요 그 국제 인권 조약의 다양한 권리들이 보장되어 있지만 시간 관계상 이런 사회 통제 관점에서 주목해야 될 북한 인권 실상 몇 가지를 말씀드리겠습니다.
So there are a lot of rights stated in the by the international community, but there are a lot of them. But due to the time limitation, I'll be looking at just around the human rights around the social control.
김정은 우상화와 사회주의 체제 명분 유지라는 명분을 갖다 댄다고 한다면 첫째로 신앙의 자유를 철저하게 탄압할 수밖에 없습니다.
So with the under the pretext of the maintaining the socialism system, it has always so one of that concept is to stop the freedom of religion.
북한도 이제 그 청년 세대가 이제 사회주의 체제를 유지할 수 있는 핵심 층이라는 것을 잘 알고 있기 때문에 청년 교양 보장법이라는 그 이 법을 제정해서 청년들에 대한 사상 통제를 강화하고 있습니다.
And also this the young generation of North Koreans, that is the core group to actually maintain the socialist system. So they introduce the Youth Education Security Act to control that part.
이 청년교양보장법에서 청년들이 하지 말아야 될 행위 중에 핵심적인 행위 중에 하나로 종교 행위를 들고 있습니다.
And one of that prohibited activities that a youth should be doing is religious activities.
그리고 그 요거와 연계돼서 좀 얘기를 드릴 수 있는 것은 좀 관심을 가져줘야 될 이슈 중에 하나가 대한민국 국민에 대한 억류 상황이 지속되고 있다는 점입니다. 억류. 예.
And also there's and also connected to that, another thing that we need to focus on is actually like detention of the South Korean nationals.
3명은 선교사고요. 3명은 북한 이탈 주민으로서 한국 국적을 취득한 분입니다.
And 3 of them are missionaries, and 1 is North Korean but had achieved a South Korean nationality.
2013년에 이제 그 유인 납치된 것으로 이제 추정되고 있는 김정욱 선교사는 북한 당국의 발표에 의하면 북한 내 잠입해서 지하 종교를 설립하고 관리하려고 잠입한 것으로 그 요인 중에 하나로 발표한 바 있습니다. 김정욱.
So 2013. So it looks like from the UN's point of view, it's assumed that he has been kidnapped. But one of the missionaries called Kim Jong-uk, he has been detained because of so-called spreading of underground churches.
그 김국기, 최춘길 선교사는 이제 그 또 똑같이 유인 납치돼 있는 상황으로 추정되는데 북한의 발표에 의하면 최고 존엄, 북한으로 말하면 김정은이겠죠. 김정은에 대한 테러 기도 행위를 했다는 발표를 한 바 있습니다.
So and also other missionaries, Guk-ki Kim and also Jo Chung-gil. So they've been detained, and it looks like they have been detained, and it's been known they've been detained because of an attempt on terrorist activity on Kim Jong-un.
북한의 체제 유지를 가장 핵심적으로 위협이 되는 부분은 외부 정보의 유입입니다.
And one of the most threatening aspects, which for the maintenance of the socialist regime, is the information coming in from the outside.
그 유엔을 비롯한 국제사회, 특히 최근에 이제 11월 달에 유엔 인권 이사의 주요한 그 인권 기제 하나가 UPR인데요. 그 4차 UPR 등에서도 이러한 정보 통제 문제가 그 가장 이슈화되고 있습니다. 예, 4차 UPR이라고 11월 7일 날 있었습니다.
So and so in the international community, there's the fourth UPR meeting, and there is also a lot of discussions around this issue.
북한 주민의 통제를 위해서 최근에 그 특별법들을 일련의 특별법을 제정하고 있는데 그 세 가지 악법이 이제 국제사회의 주목을 받고 있습니다. 반동 사상 문화 배격법, 평양 문화어 보호법, 청년 교양 보장법 세 개 악법입니다.
So and also there's a lot of concern around this really like very evil laws which was introduced for this control, and one was the Reactionary Ideology and Culture Rejection Act, and 죄송한데 그 반동 사상 문화 배격법, 그리고 두 가지 뭐라고 하시죠?
평양 문화 보호법.
And also Pyongyang Cultural Language Protection Act, and the Youth Education Security Act.
거기에 보면 이제 남한 말투, 표현 이런 것뿐만 아니라 외국 노래, 춤, 옷차림, 그 몸 단장 이런 것까지 다 통제를 하고 있습니다.
And if you see that it actually defines not like it defines around not just like expression for like in terms of like a South Korean accent, but also it talks about like what you should be wearing, what the song that you like, the foreign songs that you're listening, as well as the what you have to wear, and also like the personal grooming level that you need to take.
그 어떻게 통역할지 모르겠지만 그 평양 문화 보호법에 보면 그 조문상으로 청춘 남녀는 오빠라는 말을 쓰지 말라고 아주 조문상으로도 돼 있습니다.
I'm not sure how this is going to interpret well, but in that the Pyongyang Cultural Language Protection Act, it even stipulates that a woman, a North Korean woman, cannot call a North Korean like an older male oppa, which is like a friendly way of calling your a male which is older than you.
그만큼 남한 문화가 북한 주민들에게 폭넓게 퍼져 있고 이것이 북한 당국으로서는 체제의 결정적인 위협이라고 보고 있는 거죠.
And so, but from that, because that's from like a South Korean kind of like an expression, and so you can say that it's actually very widespread, these kind of expressions coming from South Korea. So that from the authorities' point of view in North Korea, that is one of the biggest threat to their regime.
그 이러한 이 법을 바탕으로 북한 주민을 통제하는 방식은 제가 세 가지라고 생각합니다. 하나는 사형까지 취할 수 있는 형사적 책임입니다.
And so, based on these laws, so there are three ways to do this social control of the residents. One is to introduction of capital punishment.
그 두 번째는 사상 교양과 공개 투쟁입니다.
And second is ideology education, as well as public so-called public struggle.
그 공개 투쟁의 방식을 평양 문화 보호법에서 규정하고 있는데 그 중에 이제 좀 구체적인 어떤 방식을 소개하면 하나는 공개 재판이고 하나는 공개 처형이 법적으로 명시돼 있습니다.
So when we say public struggle, so we talked. So for example, like just to quote some parts in the the Pyongyang the Cultural Language Protection Act says it says in detail. It talks about public trials and public execution. It actually mentions it specifically.
형사소송법에 보면 현지 공개 재판을 조직한다는 조항이 있는데 이 공개 재판의 목적은 군중을 각성시키고 하지 말라는 그런 본보기를 보이기 위한 그 재판 방식이기 때문에 비인권적인 재판 방식이라고 할 수 있겠죠.
So if you go into their criminal procedure law, there is an article around organizing these kind of public courts, and the aim of these courts is actually to actually revitalize this, like the minds of the people, and also to be like a scapegoat kind of basis of process. So it violates human rights in that sense.
마찬가지로 공개 처형은 가장 비인권적인 처형 방식인데요. 이것도 마찬가지로 그 각성을 시키기 위해서 군중들이 모인 장소에서 이 사형을 집행한다는 이런 아주 비인권적인 방식인 거죠.
And also the public execution is also a very human rights violating procedure, and that's also the aim of to show to the people and revitalize the mind, and that is actually in front of the public, which is heavily violating the human rights.
그 세 번째는 이제 연대 책임입니다. 이런 예를 들자면 이 주거 지역인 인민반이라고 있거든요. 인민반이나 그다음에 이제 기관 단체 기업소나 그다음에 가정에서 이런 현상이 일어난 거에 대해서 연대 책임을 묻는 거예요.
And also third is to guilty by association. So they are in the residential areas, they are the people's unit, and also there are the enterprises, the companies, and also there are the families. So within all these, they actually have this kind of the system of guilt by association to control.
그 마지막으로 보면 잘 아시겠지만 오늘 안보 문제가 있잖아요. 안보 문제 중에서도 이제 핵과 미사일 같은 대량 살상 무기를 개발하다 보면 소위 민생에 투입돼야 될 재원들을 그 대량 살상 무기에 투입하기 때문에 이러한 이 대량 살상 무기의 개발은 북한 주민의 소위 사회권을 침해할 수밖에 없는 거예요.
And also, as you know, we've got this security issue as well. Where the nuclear and the missiles, all these kind of weapons of mass destruction, the development around that, that means a lot of the resources that should be going into the daily lives of the residents or the welfare is actually diverted to these programs, and so therefore these development of these weapons of mass destruction is actually violates the sociality of or the social rights of the residents in North Korea.
그 오늘 핵심 주제가 인권과 안보 문제인데요. 제가 이제 말씀드린 핵심 요지는 북한도 이런 안보 관점을 인권과 부적절하게 연계시켜서 가고 있는데, 그래서 체제 안보에 위협이 되는 부분에 대해서는 거부, 부인, 그 대내적 통제를 본질적으로 유지하고 있습니다.
So basically, our two focus key points here today in this session is so basically it's about human rights and also about security. And the point here is in terms of the security point of view. So there's this kind of the security perspective, and also there's this human rights perspective, and actually the regime inappropriately makes this connection in that kind of inappropriate way, and so whatever is actually a threat to the regime is either rejected or gets controlled.
그렇지만 이제 그 전적으로 거부나 부인 방식으로만은 대응할 수가 없으니까 일부 이제 국내적으로도 긍정적인 조치는 파악이 되고 있습니다.
However, it cannot do a complete blanket kind of like rejection of these kind of aspects. So there are some positive aspects within positive measures within that as well.
예를 들자면 이제 그 국내법을 제정하거나 개정하는 과정에서 인권 유린 부분들을 많이 도입하고 있는 것 같습니다.
So for example, one of the domestic laws, as they make the amendments, they are mentioning of violation of human rights.
그런데 이러한 어떤 긍정적인 일부 법 조치가 국제 인권 기준에 국내 내재하라고 보기는 어려울 것 같습니다.
But for these kind of like positive measures that we just mentioned, I'm not. It's a bit difficult to actually assume that that criteria of the international community has actually gone into the domestic level of the country.
그 국제사회의 인권 문제 제기를 체제 안보 관점에서 대응하는 그런 본질적인 인식의 전환이 없는 한 북한 주민의 아주 본질적인 인권 개선과 증진이 이루어지기는 어려울 것으로 저는 개인적으로 판단하고 있습니다.
So unless there is the response from the international community that actually like approaching this in a regime security point of view, unless that is happening, it's going to be a very difficult to have like a fundamental improvement of human rights.
그 인권 문제 자체뿐만 아니라 인권과 그 안보 문제가 연계된 다양한 이슈에 대해서 궁금한 사항은 Q&A 시간에 그 지속적으로 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
And also in terms of not just the human rights, but also like this connection about the human right and the security side of it. All that will be I'll be answering that in the Q&A session later. So thank you very much.
Professor Kim, thank you for giving us a very bleak representation of the very real security challenges and human rights abuses that are going on. I'm sure we'll come back to the detail of that in the Q&A. Let's move on to Professor Lee, who I think is going to talk about the International Criminal Court and how that might apply to Kim Jong-un.
네, 여러분 만나서 반갑습니다. 통일연구원의 유창입니다.
So everyone, nice to meet you all. My name is Kyu-Chang Lee in the KINU.
저는 최근에 북한의 그 사회 통제 동향하고 그다음에 ICC 국제형사재판소 회부 책임 규명과 관련된 논의 좀 전반적으로 간단하게 소개해드리겠습니다.
So let me give you a brief introduction of the current status or the current trend in terms of the social control in North Korea, as well as the accountability in terms of summoning to the ICC.
먼저 최근 사회 통제 동향 몇 가지 주목할 만한 특징 말씀드리겠습니다.
So let me start with some of the trends of the social control in the country.
북한은 이제 김정은 체제 출범 이후에 사회 통제를 지속적으로 강화하고 있습니다.
Since the Kim Jong-un regime, introduction of Kim Jong-un regime, the social control has been strengthened.
특히 이제 여러 가지 법들을 체제 유지를 위해서 사용하고 있습니다. 그러니까 룰 바이 로라고 부르죠.
So and also a lot of in order to maintain the regime, there are a lot of laws introduced, and basically with the concept of rule by law.
2020년 이전에는 형법과 형법 부칙에만 사용이 규정되어 있었습니다.
But before the 2020, there are only kind of laws stipulating around the criminal laws.
근데 2020년 이후에는 여러 가지 특별법들을 만들면서 특별법의 사용 규정을 넣고 있는데 지금까지 6개 법이 있는 걸로 파악이 됩니다.
But since 2020, there were other various kind of special laws which was created and actually has provisions around that, and it looks like there are 6 laws at the moment on that.
첫 번째가 비상방역법입니다.
And the first one is the Emergency Quarantine Act.
코로나19 발생 이후에 비상방역법을 제정을 했고 이에 대응하기 위해서 사용 규정을 3개를 넣었습니다.
So basically this was made after the COVID, and the laws around that or the regulations around that have 3 of them has been made.
그 방역 질서를 위반했다고 해서 생명까지 앗아가는 거, 사형까지 처하는 거는 국제인권 규범 위반입니다.
But however, capital punishment because you didn't adhere to the quarantine law is against the human rights international law.
실제로도 북한 이탈 주민들, 그러니까 2023년에 탈북한 북한 이탈 주민들은 코로나19 방역 질서 위반을 이유로 공개 채용된 것을 목격했다는 증언을 했습니다.
So there were like witness statements from the defectors of for the residents who've defected North Korea in 2020. They gave witness statements that they saw a public execution by shooting of people who actually didn't adhere to that.
그 최근에 사회 통제 관련해서 주목되는 거는 정보, 그러니까 외부 정보와 외부 문화가 들어가는 것을 통제하고 강화하는 것입니다.
And also there is that the social control in terms of the like the foreign culture coming into the country.
김수환 박사님께서 말씀하셨듯이 뭐 반동사상문화 배격법, 또 청년교양보장법, 평양문화보호법을 제정을 했습니다.
And also as the speaker previously has mentioned, there were the three laws, what was the reactionary ideology and culture rejection act, as well as Youth Education Security Act, as well as Pyongyang Cultural Language Protection Act.
이 중에 반동사상문화 배격법, 평양문화보호법에 사용 규정이 들어가 있습니다.
And especially the around the reactionary ideology side, and also the Pyongyang cultural language side, that have regulations stipulated to that.
그 2020년 코로나19에 북한 이탈 주민들이 많이 감소해서 증언은 많이 확보하지 못했습니다.
However, since 2016, it's COVID, there were a lot of defectors, number of defectors, which have reduced in number, so it's a bit difficult to get the witness statements.
반동사상문화 배격법, 평양문화보호법 위반해서 처형, 공개 처형됐다는 증언들은 확보가 되었습니다.
And however, we did get witness statements that the reactionary ideology law and also the Pyongyang cultural law, because of that, they were like witness statements that there were public executions for the people who didn't adhere to.
2020년 농장원 한 명이 한국 노래 70곡과 영화 3편을 봤다고 해서 공개 처형되었다는 증언이 있었습니다.
And 2010, there was a witness statement that one of the members of the public farm, they was publicly executed because he watched 3 South Korean films.
그리고 2020년 20대 청년 3명이 한국 영화를 봤다는 이유로 총살되었다는 증언도 수집이 되었습니다.
And also there was a witness statement in 2020 that the youth in the 20s, 3 of them has been executed by shooting because they watched a South Korean movie.
그리고 2023년 2월에는 적지물 처리법이라는 법을 만들었습니다.
And also in 2023, a law called Enemy Goods Disposal Act has been introduced.
이 적지물이라는 용어는 한국에서는 쓰지 않고 북한에서만 쓰는 용어인데요. 적의 물건이라는 뜻입니다.
So basically, it actually that's 적지물 that is used in the original wording is actually not used in South Korea, but it's actually used in North Korea, meaning enemy goods, basically.
이 적지물 처리법에는 적지물을 북한의 사회주의 제도를 붕괴시키기 위해서 들여보내는 적의 물건, 모든 물건 이렇게 정의가 되어 있습니다.
And it defines enemy goods as every goods coming in from the enemy that destroys or collapses the socialist system.
이 적지물 처리법에도 사용 규정이 하나 들어가 있습니다.
And also there is the regulation around that, which was introduced. One regulation which was introduced based on that.
그다음에 대표적인 사회통제법이 형법입니다.
And the most representative way, so the most biggest way to control socially is through the criminal law system.
2023년 12월 형법이 개정되었는데 몇 가지 주목되는 특징을 말씀드리겠습니다. 2023년 12월.
And in 2023, the criminal law has been updated, and let me introduce some of them.
2022년 형법에 통일이라는 조항이 있었는데 이게 23년 개정되면서 다 삭제가 되었습니다.
So there were articles which mentioned the word unification in 2022, but however in 2023 that has been deleted.
그러니까 북한이 남북 관계를 적대적 두 국가 관계다. 또 이제 통일은 포기하겠다 이렇게 선언했는데 그와 관련된 조치로 분석이 됩니다.
So in North Korea, they redefine the relationship as an adversarial kind of relationship, as well as mentioning of the abandonment of unification. And I think that that is a background. That changed the amendment was the one which came after this.
저는 개인적으로 가장 심각한 북한 인권 문제는 바로 통일 포기하는 거라고 생각합니다.
However, I think the biggest human rights violation or the issue, which I think is the most serious, is about this abandonment of unification.
남북한이 평화 통일이 되어야 주민의 인권이 개선되고 인도적 상황이 개선될 수가 있는데 통일 포기는 주민들의 희망을 앗아가는 것이죠.
Because under this umbrella or this concept of unification, all these improvements around the daily lives of the residents in North Korea could be improved. However, because this abandonment is actually an abandonment of the daily lives of the North Korean people.
그다음에 형법에는 사형 규정이 11개에서 16개로 5개가 증가되었습니다.
And also in terms of, in the criminal law, the capital punishment, the provisions have increased. Provisions around that the capital punishment law has increased from 11 to 16. So there's 5 more.
무기 개발과 관련된 조항이 2개인데요. 이는 북한의 핵무기 개발과 관련 있는 걸로 분석이 됩니다.
And there's also law around weapons development, and it looks like that is related to the nuclear weapons development.
그다음에 폭발물과 관련된 조항이 2개가 조항 2개의 사형이 들어갔습니다.
And also there are 2 provisions around this explosive that leads to capital punishment.
북한의 체제 보위를 강화하는 방향으로 개정이 되었습니다.
So basically, the direction of this change were all around the security of the regime.
반국가 선전 선동죄의 사형이 추가가 되었습니다.
And also, for the provisions under the anti-state propaganda and agitation or the incitement, that leads to a death penalty.
유언비어 날조 유포죄의 법정형도 강화가 되었습니다.
And also, fabricating and spreading rumors provision has also been strengthened.
이어서 인민반 조직 운영법에 대해서 말씀드리겠습니다.
So now let me talk about the People's Unit Organization and Operation Act.
북한 인민반은 북한은 20에서 한 40 정도 가구를 구성되는 말단 행정 조직을 말합니다.
So basically, this people's unit, so-called, or in Korean word 인민반, is actually like the smallest unit of households, about 20 to 40 of households.
인민반 조직 운영법은 인민반들에게 인민반장에게 역할을 강화하는 방향으로 그 내용들이 있습니다.
And this act has a strengthening of the role of the chief. So people units chief.
그 세대에 몇 명이 있는지, 뭐 5명이 살고 있는지 6명이 살고 있는지 이런 걸 파악하고 그 세대 구성원이 진짜 가족인지 아니면 외지에서 들어온 사람인지 그걸 인민반장에게 파악하라 그렇게 규정을 하고 있습니다.
So these chiefs, they need to have an understanding of each household, how many are living in there. Like for example, like 5 or 6, for example, if they're 5 living, 6 living, and also these the people with the members within the household, whether they're family or whether this person is from an outer area or outer region.
왜 그런 규정이 들어가 있는가 생각해 보면은 탈북민들이 증가되면서 행방 불명자들이 있거든요. 그래서 그런 탈북민 수, 행방 불명자들을 좀 구체적으로 파악하고자 하는 의도가 있는 걸로 생각이 됩니다.
And if you think about why that is, why did actually strengthen that kind of area, because there are a lot of defectors and also therefore people going missing in the country. So I think that measure is to actually have a understanding of, have a more detailed understanding of that front.
또 인민반장은 인민 발언들 속에 그 반사회주의, 비사회주의적 현상들이 나타나지 않도록 해야 된다는 규정도 있습니다.
And also the chief has a obligation to, or has a duty to not allow the phenomenon of anti-socialism or non-socialism to happen?
이거는 좀 전에 말씀드린 반동사사문화 배격법이나 평양문화보법, 청년교양법에 대한 대응의 일환으로 분석이 됩니다.
And I think this is like the response of that's changed is to the response of the introduction of the three laws that we talked about, the reactionary law and also the Pyongyang law and as well as the youth education law.
그래서 책임규명과 관련된 몇 가지 중요한 내용 말씀드리겠습니다.
And also, so now let me move on to the accountability side of this.
2014년에 유엔 북한인권조사위원회 COI라고 하죠. 보고서를 제출하면서 북한의 반인도 범죄가 발생했고 이제 반인도 범죄에 대한 책임이 져야 된다 이렇게 발표를 했습니다.
So, as mentioned previously, in 2014, the COI, the Commission of Inquiry report has been submitted, and in the report it says there were crimes against humanity as well as mass large-scale violation of human rights.
그 방법으로 유엔 안보리에게 국제형사재판소 ICC에 회부하거나 아니면 특별재판소를 설립해라 이런 권고를 했습니다.
So there was the recommendation from the UN was to summon to the ICC or create a separate a crime court.
그 이후 10년 동안 지금 한국 내에서도 ICC 회부 논의가 지속되고 있습니다.
And there is so since then for 10 years in South Korea there's been a lot of debates around about summoning to the ICC.
그런데 이제 어려운 거는 문제는 ICC 회부되기 위해서는 유엔 안보리 결의가 필요한데 안보리 결의가 채택되기 위해서는 상임이사국 5개를 포함한 9개 나라 이사국의 결의 찬성이 필요합니다.
And however, in order to do that, there needs to be the Security Council resolution. And to have that resolution, you need the permanent members to agree to the resolution.
그래서 유엔 상임이사국인 중국과 러시아가 북한 인권 문제 소극적이어서 이 어려움을 겪고 있습니다.
However, the permanent members, China and Russia, they're very passive about this issue, which makes things difficult.
그리고 한국에서는 2016년 북한 인권법이 제정되었습니다.
And in 2016 in South Korea, the North Korean human rights law has been passed.
그러니까 가해자들에 대한 책임을 묻기 위해서는 그 자료 축적이 매우 중요한 문제입니다.
And in order to hold these culprits accountable is to pile up and accumulate evidences.
이를 위해서 통일부의 북한인권 기록센터하고 법무부의 북한인권 기록보존소 2개의 기관을 설립을 했습니다.
통일부의
북한인권 기록센터, 법무부 북한인권 기록보존소, 기록보존소.
So basically, and two institutions has been set up. So we've got two institutions. So one is the North Korean Human Rights Record Center by the Ministry of Unification, and also the North Korean Human Rights Record Preservation Center by the Ministry of Justice.
COI 보고서 이제 발표된 지 10년이 지났습니다.
And it has been 10 years since the COI report.
그 10년 동안 책임 규명도 크게 이제 3가지 특징을 이제 보이고 있는데요.
And this accountability side has shown about 3 characteristics over the 10 years.
첫 번째는 지금 말씀드린 형사적 책임을 묻는 겁니다. 그러니까 ICC 회부, 보편적 관할권 이런 문제가 계속 지속적으로 논의가 되고 있습니다.
And so the first one is about the one we talked about, the criminal justice to holding accountable. So like the summoning to the ICC as well as who's responsible for what.
두 번째는 반인도 범죄 피해를 입은 사람들의 보상, 배상 문제가 논의가 되고 있습니다.
And also the second one is about the compensation for the victims of the crimes against humanity.
네, 한국에는 이제 국군 포로 납북자들이 있습니다.
And also in South Korea, there are people who are kidnapped to North Korea, as well as prisoners of war of the South Korean soldiers.
이분들이 이제 북한하고 김정은을 상대로 한국 법원에 민사 소송을 제기해서 승소 판결을 받았습니다.
and they sued the Kim Jong-un and they won at the South Korean court.
근데 이제 배상을 받기 위해서는 판결을 집행해야 되는데 그게 어려움이 있습니다.
However, in order to there needs to be a judgment or decision made in terms of the level of the compensation, and that's the difficult part.
그래서 저를 포함한 전문가들은 한국 정부가 먼저 국군 포로하고 납북자들에게 보상을 해주고 나중에 북한 정부로부터 구상권을 청구해야 된다 이런 주장을 하고 논의를 하고 있습니다.
And also so basically like the specialists or the specialists like ours, like people in South Korea, what they are suggesting is to first compensate these two types of groups of people, so the people who are kidnapped, but also the prisoners of war who are held in North Korea, and then ask for a as a government asking for that compensation to North Korean government.
세 번째 책임 규명과 관련된 특징은 중대한 인권 침해를 한 북한의 기관이나 개인을 제재하는 겁니다. 인권 제재라고 부릅니다.
And the third one is about the restriction of the rights for the culprits of the human rights the culprits of the human rights violations.
여기 영국하고 유럽 연합, 미국이 인권 제재를 시행하고 있습니다.
And they are prohibitions and restrictions or sanctions by the British, the European Union, and the United States of America.
한국 내에서도 영국 또 유럽 연합, 미국처럼 북한에 대한 인권 제재를 시행해야 된다는 논의들이 있습니다.
And they are discussions or they are opinions that this kind of sanctions should be also done by like South Korea, like what it was done by the European Union and United States.
형사 책임 묻는 거는 좀 어렵지만 인권 제재는 지금 할 수가 있는 주제라고 생각을 합니다.
Although it is difficult to put them to be criminally accountable, that part of the sanction, this method of sanction is I think it's quite feasible.
이상 제 발표를 마치고 혹시 뭐 부족했던 내용을 질문해 주시면은 답변드리겠습니다.
But yeah, and that's it for me. And yeah, anything that you want to ask, we'll take Q&A later.
예, 감사합니다.
Thank you.
So again, thank you for providing us with a disturbing picture of this tightening of control. It's perhaps worth mentioning to the audience that our delegation has, in addition to coming to Cambridge, also visited the All-Parliamentary Group on North Korea in our parliament, which has remained, I think, fairly vigilant in trying to raise awareness of the importance of the human rights abuses in the DPRK. I'm sure that's an issue that we'll want to look at in thinking about what specific actions international governments can take. But let me move to our respondents to get their initial reactions very briefly, because I want then to invite audience participation as well. But John, perhaps we can start with you.
Yes, gladly. Thank you. Thank you to all the speakers for a very interesting set of presentations. On the question of human rights abuses, I think we are all horrified by what is going on in North Korea, but it's extremely, thank you. I think too it's extremely important that we anchor any accusation of human rights abuses firmly in existing international human rights law. And I don't think, for example, that you are on very safe ground arguing that the very large amounts that North Korea is spending on munitions on defence is a human rights abuse because it takes away from social provisions. If you argue that way, you could actually argue that any defence spending is a human rights abuse, which I think would preoccupy a lot of other governments too. Similarly, executions. Even public executions, we need to remember that it's been well established that capital punishment is not a human rights abuse. That's been argued over by court after court after court. Even public executions, practiced in part by the United States. If you an execution in the United States is often witnessed by the families of the victim. that has also been tested legally and is probably not a human rights abuse. You're on very shaky ground on those points. On the question of Kim Jong-un going to the International Criminal Court, I think legally, yes, you have a very strong case. But think of the implications of what we are saying here. Unless you are prepared to engineer the violent overthrow of the North Korean regime, so you've actually got Kim Jong-un and can send him where you want, what your government for a long time has been trying to do has been peaceful reunification, which involves negotiating with the North Koreans. What leader in his right mind is going to negotiate peaceful reunification if he knows that at the end of it, he's going to be hauled off to The Hague and put in front of a court? You have created, if you do that, you have created a very significant disincentive for the North Korean regime to engage seriously in any kind of reunification talks. I'll stop there, thanks.
Thanks, John. Maybe let's take a response, actually. I think that might be helpful. Would you like to comment? Yes.
예, 에버라드 대선, 저한테 두 가지 코멘트를 하신 것 같습니다. 하나는 이제 그 모든 국가가 그 국방비를 무기 개발과를 포함한 국방비를 투입하는데 이것이 이제 북한만 유일하게 이제 이 재원을 민생에서 그 상당 부분 전용해서 쓰는 것으로 보는 것은 좀 부적절한 것이 아니냐 하는 코멘트인 것 같습니다. 그런 물론 대한민국도 국방비를 편성해서 이제 국가 안보를 수행을 하는 거죠. 근데 저는 좀 다르게 보는 그러니까 그 측면에서 보면 일반적인 우리가 국가 방위를 위한 어떤 이 국방비 투입하고 북한의 경우는 소위 NPT 체제를 위반하면서까지 그 국제사의 어떤 그 룰을 위반하는 거잖아요. 핵무기를 개발한다는 것은 국제사회 그 NPT 체제를 위협하는 국제사회 안보 위협을 하는 것이기 때문에 그런 부적절한 어떤 그 국제 안보를 위협하는 이 대량살상 무기 개발을 위한 이 소위 국방비 투입은 북한의 주민의 민생에 결정적인 그 부정적인 영향을 미친다고 보는 저는 입장이기 때문에 에버라드 대사님하고는 약간 좀 다른 인식을 갖고 있다. 그렇게 답변을 드리고 두 번째 그 퍼블릭 엑스큐션의 문제는 좀 더 다르게 생각합니다. 대한민국과 이 북한 모두 소위 ICCPR의 그 선택 의정서를 사형 폐지에 관한 선택 의정서에 가입하지 않았기 때문에 합법적으로 최고법원의 합법적인 그 결정에 의해서 사형 을 선고하고 집행하는 것이 가능한데 미국이 피해자나 가족을 참관시켜서 처형하는 것과 북한이 공개 처형을 하는 방식은 완전히 다른 차원의 문제라고 보는 것이 뭐냐 하면 아까 제가 그 평양 문화와 보호법을 얘기했듯이 공개 투쟁의 한 방식이 이 공개 처형인데 그 공개 처형을 하는 목적은 이 단순히 피해자 가족이 참관하는 것이 아니라 다양한 계층에서 참관하도록 국가가 독려해서 공개된 장소에서 처형을 하는 것이죠. 그 처형하는 목적은 아까 제가 말씀드렸듯이 비사회주의적이고 반사회주의적인 그 행동을 하지 말라는 모범을 보이고 군중을 각성시키기 위해서 한다는 점에서 좀 차이가 있지 않냐. 그런 점에서는 그 이 미국이 처형하는 이 참관하는 방식과 이 북한이 이 공개 처형하는 방식의 이 비인권적 측면은 좀 다른 차원이라고 저는 생각합니다.
죄송합니다. 아닙니다. 네. 최대한 다 적었습니다. So I think I've got two comments. So I think there's I think there are two major comments around that. So one is this about the defense budget. So why North Korea why would they be why would they be inappropriate for them to actually use that defense budget basically and also but however diverting that where it can be used that for the daily lives of the people. I mean in South Korea as well we do have the defense budget and we set them and then we do our own security measures and activities but in that kind of way if you look at that in that kind of way they are that kind of like the setting of the defense budget in order to to have like to defend the country. That is one side, but the North Korean side of it, the actually aim is actually the nuclear weapon development, which actually infringes or threatens the international community, which is and it's and I think in that kind of way, that also has has the negative impact on the daily lives of the people, and I think in that terms of that in that kind of way in perspective, I have a bit of different perspective to you in terms of that, and also in terms of public execution, I've got a different thinking on that one. So like in the U.S., for example, as you said, like people like the victim's family, to watch and all that. I think it's a bit different because like about if you can remember about this the Pyongyang Cultural Language Protection Act side, like that is actually it's actually mentioned as part of the public struggle, and it's a procedure of a public struggle, and actually that is actually to not just about the victim family or related people to watch it, but actually various groups to the authority makes various groups to actually watch this and actually actually does that execution in front of everyone, and actually the aim of that is actually to awaken the people. In terms of the ideology and all that, and that in that kind of way, I think it's violating the human rights in that kind of way. But yeah, that is I think we've got a bit of difference in opinions. But yeah, that's what I think.
Okay, Professor Lee.
세 가지 정도로 나눠서 답변을 드리겠습니다.
So let me make answer in about three, divide into three to answer.
먼저 에베로드 전 대사님께서 무기 개발하고 탄약 폭발물 사용에 대한 사용 규정 이런 게 꼭 국제법 위반이냐 이런 질문을 하셨는데 하셨습니다.
So what, as John said, we talked about the 폭발법 위반이라고 하셨나요? 네. So yeah, like so development of weapons and like ammunitions that kind of side of the law. We talked about the violation around that.
1960년 채택된 시민적 정치적 권리에 관한 국제규약 ICCPR이라고 그러죠. 여기는 사형은 가능하게 규정되어 있는데 가장 중한 범죄에 대해서만 사형을 부과하도록 되어 있습니다.
In the ICCPR in 1960, which was introduced, that's actually regulate. So it does allow the capital punishment, but however, at the very severe kind of level, it allows that.
근데 그 조항에 대해서 유엔 시민적 정치적 권리 위원회는 무기 사용이나 폭발물 사용에 대해서 사형을 규정해서는 안 된다. 이거는 국제법 위반이다 이렇게 일반 논평에서 이야기를 한 적이 있습니다. 그리고 두 번째는 공개 처형하는 게 곧 인권 침해냐 이런 질문을 해주셨습니다. 모든 게 공개 처형을 다 인권 침해 이렇게 일반적으로 얘기하기는 어려운데, 근데 내가 보기 싫은데 가서 억지로 봐라 이렇게 하는 거는 그 인권에 반하는 거죠. 그래서 북한은 공개 처형할 때 운동장이나 장마당에 그 공개 처형되는 사람들을 모아놓고 주민들을 다 모아서 강제로 보게 합니다. 그건 인권에 반하는 거죠.
And also, in terms of like public execution, I think the human rights infringement comes that I don't want to see it, but you're forced to see it. I think that is that part which has the infringement.
그다음에 세 번째는 남북한의 평화 통일 얘기하면서 김정은의 ICC 회부 얘기하는 거는 좀 앞뒤가 맞지 않느냐 이런 취지의 질문을 해주셨습니다.
And also, we talked about the unification, the peaceful unification process, and that is the link between this ICC summoning.
사실 큰 주제이긴 한데, 근데 아마도 이제 김정은 체제가 존속되는 한 김정은에 대한 ICC 회부는 현실적으로 어려운 측면이 있습니다.
I mean, it's a very big topic, but I think as long as the Kim Jong-un regime is there, I think that something to the ICC is going to be very difficult.
그래서 막 김정은의 ICC 회부가 현실화되기 위해서는 북한의 체제가 이제 바뀌어야 되는 거죠.
So in order to have the Kim Jong-un at the ICC is actually we need a regime change.
그래서 체제 전환 과정에서의 가해자들에 대한 책임, 피해자들에 대한 보상, 화해 이런 것들을 다 이런 것도 이제 전환기 정의라고 이야기를 하고 그런 과정에서 김정은에 대한 ICC도 물론 그때까지 살아 있어야 되는데 어떤 그런 논의가 되는 이제 그런 전환기 정의 과정에서 측면에서 아마 논의가 될 것 같습니다.
And I think, yeah, in terms of that kind of transformation of regime, that is where I think we will have that definition of around the compensation to the victims, and also the response accountability around the crimes, as well as the reconciliation. I think those needs to be defined and discussed, and then we can maybe talk about the ICC. But, well, provided that he's still alive by then. I'm not sure if that will be possible, but yeah, he needs to be alive so that we can have him there. But yes.
Okay, let's move on to Ramon.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be brief. Thanks for your presentations. A couple of points I will raise. The first one, the importance of context. Since 2018-19, since the failure of the Hanoi Summit, it's been very difficult to get policymakers interested in North Korea, never mind North Korean human rights, until recently. Recently, you have seen with this North Korean support for Russia a surge in interest really at the highest level on North Korean issues, including human rights, right? And there have been discussions in different capitals. Just 2 days ago, we had one in Brussels, precisely on the intersection between the rights of the young people being sent to Russia, essentially to kill Europeans or to be killed by Europeans in Ukraine. That's what's happening here because we're in a war, right? How this interacts with the broad discussion about North Korea's support for Ukraine and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So I think if you can place this discussion into a broader context, I think you could be able to reach out to policymakers, other audiences that maybe will have less knowledge or interest in North Korea, as I said, never mind North Korea human rights. Yeah, the second point, the importance, we have a new context, as we all know. There is a new president in the United States who is going to reach out to North Korea again, whether we like it or not, and the way he's going to reach out. I think he will, yes. And I cannot go into details, but I know some people who are working for Trump on Korean issues, right, and who will be working for Trump. So he's going to reach out again, right? And it is important. This has been recorded, actually. Okay, so.
Sorry.
No, I shouldn't have answered your question. Yeah.
Just don't mention names.
Don't mention. I won't mention names. Yeah, but I think that your government needs to prepare for an environment in which you may have to engage with North Korea, not to be left out. And I think that's important, actually, right? And some policymakers in Korea have already mentioned this. They said any dialogue between North Korea and the U.S. needs South Korea to be part of it. And I think that will be important in your case, focusing on human rights, because I mean, John, we've met North Koreans in different settings, right? And obviously you've been based there. They do talk about human rights in their own way. And I think it's something that is easier for UK, other European countries to raise with the North Koreans. But if there is an inter-Korean process, I think this is something that you will need to consider how to engage with North Korea. And I go back to the point that John made. If you talk about Kim Jong-un being sent to the ICJ, well, they're not going to talk with you about it, right? But there are other issues. They're having conversations with North Koreans about health rights, for example, is something they're willing to engage in. Minority rights, women's rights, is things that they talk about. They have their own view, which is different from our view, but it's an entry point to discuss human rights, and this is something that you may be able to do if there is engagement with the North.
사실은 아까 우리가 이규창 시장이 얘기했지만 기존에는 어떤 그런 일반적인 방식으로 북한 문제를 다뤄왔다 그러면 2013년에 이제 COI가 설립됐다는 것은 그동안에 북한이 국제사회가 인권을 제기했을 때 별로 긍정적인 반응을 보이지 않았다는 어떤 새로운 접근 방식이 필요했던 것이죠.
So, although Kyu Chang discussed this, So until that COI, we've been, with the COI 2013 and 2014, if we've been using kind of generic kind of method to like original kind of generic method to approach this North Korean issue. But the fact that this new kind of COI created in 2013 is that I think it kind of shows that North Korea hasn't been responding positively through these accusations from the international community.
그 인권 유린 책임자에 대한 임피니티가 북한 내에서 근본적으로 해소가 되지 않으니까 어카운트빌리티로 북한 당국이 어떤 긍정적인 태도를 취하라고 이제 정책적 전환을 한 거죠, 국제사회가.
But because of this, the accountability of the people actually, doing the violation of the human rights, because of that is not being resolved, now this international community is actually having like a change in policy, so that now it's actually asked for that accountability to the nation, to the country, to actually act on that.
북한이 이제 ICC가 관할할 수 있는 그 로마 스튜디오에 가입하지도 않았고 동의하지도 않았고 이규정 실장이 말씀하셨듯이 그 유엔 안전보장 이사의 결정 구조 때문에 그 유엔 안전보장 이사의 결의를 통한 ICC 회부도 사실상 현실적으로는 쉽지 않은 상황입니다.
And also in terms of the ICC and the areas within that, I mean, North Korea is actually not part of it. They're not the members of that, and also the resolution that we discussed about with the permanent members, that also is difficult. So, and also even if it does happen, summoning to the ICC is not going to be possible.
그 라몬 교수가 말씀하셨듯이 지금 이제 러시아 파병이 갖고 있는 그 국제 안보적 측면의 위협, 또 유럽 연합에서 바라보는 러시아 파병이 갖고 있는 우려 사항, 예를 들면 조금 전에 말씀하셨듯이 이 유럽인을 직접 참전해서 전투에서 유럽인을 군이 죽일 수 있는 거고 또 죽임을 당할 수도 있는 새로운 현상이 이제 발생하고 있는 거죠.
And also, yeah, as Ramon said, about this, the threat of towards the international security, and also the view from the European Union about this, the context of a European is being killed or killed a North Korean soldier it's a new phenomenon.
북한군의 이제 러시아 우크라이나 전쟁 파병이 갖고 있는 국제 인도법적 측면, 그리고 유럽인들이 이런 그 파병이 갖고 올 유럽 차원의 안보적 이 위협, 이런 인식들을 활용해서 북한 인권 문제의 리치아웃 방식을 좀 더 확대하고 새롭게 전략을 구상하는 부분은 지금 이제 초창기이기 때문에 우리 정부 이번 이 회의를 마치고 나서 저희들이 좀 더 그 포괄적인 어떤 방식을 고민해서 정부의 정책 건의도 하고 우리 정책 당국들이 또 다양한 좀 이 아이디어를 가지고 새롭게 접근할 수 있도록 좋은 아이디어를 주셔서 감사합니다.
And also this, yeah. So about basically about this, the implication of the deployment of the North Korean soldiers, about in terms of the international security side of it, but also the human rights, like the international human rights side of it. I think using that, as you said, and contextualizing it to actually reach out about this, the North Korean issue, and expanding it. I think at the moment it's just begin. It just began. This about the deployment. So after these meetings, we're gonna be going back and then and talking amongst ourselves and internally look into this, review it, and we're gonna be making political suggestions to the government, and hopefully the South Korean government and the various policy makers will have their own various ideas and hopefully will have a new kind of approach. But yeah, thank you very much for the great idea. It can be a good way.
그리고 두 번째 질문은 트럼프 행정부 출범 이후에 미국과 북한 또 북한과 미국 간의 대화가 재개될 가능성이 있고 그 과정에 우리 한국이 참여해야 된다는 이렇게 말씀을 해주셨는데 전적으로 동의를 합니다.
So, and also the second point about the change of administration to the Trump administration, and also the resumption of dialogue between North Korea and the U.S. about the possibility around that, as well as South Korea being in the mix. Yes, I completely agree with you.
그 북한의 보건 의료 수준이 낮기 때문에 건강권 증진을 위한 보건 의료 협력도 필요하고요.
And yes, as you said, there is the level of the medical kind of infrastructures. It's very low. So in North Korea, so yeah, about this kind of right of health is something that we can like cooperate with them.
또 북한이 재해재난에도 매우 취약합니다.
And also North Korea is very weak in terms of responding to disasters.
또 기후 변화 문제가 또 전 세계 기후 변화 문제가 또 북한에도 많은 영향을 미치고 있고 그래서 그런 재해재난 기후 문제에 관한 남북 간의 협력도 필요하고요.
And also there is this issue about climate change that because also North Korea is affected by this climate change, so it's something that we can cooperate on as well.
또 남북 간의 분단으로 인한 문제들도 있습니다.
And also there is this issue about this division between these two countries. So the issue coming out of this division between these two countries.
지금 이산 가족들이 있는데 지금 나이가 많아지면서 고령화되고 있고 사망자도 많이 발생하고 있습니다.
And because of this division, we've got these separated families between these two countries. But however, now as time goes by, they're getting older, and a lot of them are passing away.
또 이산 가족이 전 세계에 흩어져 있고 또 미국에도 있습니다.
And and also these kind of separated families, they're distributed all around the world, including the U.S.
그래서 만약에 뭐 북미 대화, 미북 대화가 이루어지면은 그런 뭐 이산 가족, 한국, 북한, 미국의 이산 가족 상봉 그런 것도 논의가 되면 성사가 되면 좋겠다는 생각을 갖고 있습니다.
And so yeah, so once this dialogue between North Korea and the U.S. Resumes, we talk about these separated families, so that this reunion between the people in the South Korea, the U.S. as well as in North Korea can happen.
그리고 이제 관건은 북한의 호응이라고 할 수가 있겠는데 그런 이제 진정성을 가지고 북한에 대해서 일관된 대화, 촉구, 의지천명 이런 게 필요하다고 생각합니다.
But however, I think the issue here is the response from or like a positive response from North Korea. They need to respond with genuineness as also have the intention of such dialogues.
예, 이 정도로 제 답변 마치겠습니다.
And I think that's it from me. Thank you.
Yes, Kevin. Last but not least.
Okay, thank you very much. It's difficult being the third discussant because I basically agree with the first two discussants, but I will just elaborate.
Including Ramon's point about the imminent discussions between the Trump administration and the DPRK.
Well, actually, I did want to say one thing, which was about the ICC. I mean, I agree with the point that there's probably a legal and a moral case for that, although I'm not a legal scholar. But I would also raise the question of what concrete impact that would have, because if we look at Putin, I mean, is there any sense in which Putin has been tempered in his actions by the censure from the international community? In fact, I often cringe when I hear the term international community. Putin just held a BRICS summit that was attended by 36 national leaders, including the most populous countries of India and China, and so I think there's a real an increasing gulf diverging about the sense of I'm not saying this view is correct, but the sense of hypocrisy about the way that the West deals with Ukraine, but then we have the situation in Gaza ongoing and things like that. So I think that the pressure over human rights will be interpreted as simply a sort of an aggressive posture of the West, and it won't have the sort of normative impact that we might expect. So there's that issue, and I think in general there is a danger when the human rights issue can be weaponized to such an extent that it really it's part of a containment strategy, and one of the problems I see on the current approach of the South Korean administration is that the emphasis is all on deterrence and containment, but the door is not being left open at some future point during the Trump administration where dialogue may be not just a possibility but necessary again. So that's one issue. I did want to just draw attention, which wasn't mentioned by the discussants, about. So the second point I wanted to make very briefly was that I think the presentations made very clear that the key sort of weakness of the North Korean regime is how outside information, and particularly South Korean cultural products, are challenging societal control. And so we can, by extension, assume that is the source of change within North Korea. If the North Korean authorities are so nervous about it, that the possibility that even the idea of a one-nation Korea, pan-nationalism, can challenge the North Korea's hold over the population. So, but I feel there's kind of a contradiction between, for example, the containment policy, but the international sanctions regime as well, which is there for good reasons, but it also, in certain ways, can work against the flow of information into the country, because we need to ask, where is this information coming from? Is it coming from people sending balloons over the DMZ? I would say probably not, although correct me if I'm wrong. Probably more so from just the general process of North Korea's increasing engagement since the 1990s, 2000s with the outside world. Flows of goods, flows of people who have then brought back these cultural products into the country. So then I guess that's a question then. How do we negotiate these kind of tensions between strategies and how they will lead to sources of change within the country? How do we, presumably the strategy should be to open up Korea more to these flows of information as a source of change within that country. So thank you.
네, 먼저 김정은의 ICC 이제 회부와 관련해서 뭐 인권의 무기와 이런 거 좀 조심해야 된다. 또 대화도 필요하다 이런 말씀을 해주셨습니다. 저는 그건 전적으로 동의를 하고요. 그러나 다만 이제 반인도 범죄를 저질렀는데 무조건 다 용서해 주는 게 다 전부는 아닌 것 같습니다. 그래서 전환기 정의 과정에서 여러 가지 요소들이 있거든요. 정의도 고려해야 되고 평화도 고려해야 되고 또 피해를 입은 북한 주민들의 인권도 생각해야 되고 이런 여러 가지 문제가 있습니다. 그래서 정의와 인권, 평화 이게 다 배치되는 개념은 아닌 것 같고요. 그래서 이제 어떻게 조화를 찾아가야 될 건지 이제 사회적인 합의와 대화가 필요할 것 같고 ICC 회부도 이것을 누구를 ICC 회부할 건지 아니면은 정말 ICC 회부에서 국제 재판에 의해서 정의를 추구할 건지 아니면 한국 내에서는 그런 논의가 있거든요. 이게 ICC에 가져가면 한국의 주권을 좀 반하는 거 아니냐 그런 얘기들이 있거든요. 그래서 누구를 ICC에 보내고 누구는 한국 법원에서 재판하고 이런 사회적 논의도 필요하고 그런 좀 큰 주제이긴 한데 하여튼 이 정도에서 좀 말씀을 마치도록 하겠습니다.
네. 제가 먼저 좀 해도 되겠습니까? 그게 좀 더 나을 것 같아서 이해하는데. So yeah, so in terms of the ICC, something to the ICC, and also this weaponizing of the human rights, I think that we need to be careful, and also we need dialogue. I completely agree with you. However, I don't think like forgiving the person and forgiving the person who actually has committed crimes against humanity is not about that. I think I think that is it shouldn't be considered in that kind of way. And also in terms of this transition, we need to think about various aspects like definition, the justice, peace. Peace as well as the rights of the victim, the North Korean the residents. We need to look into all that, and so these two aspects of justice and also human rights, I don't think they are contradicting. I think it's about making agreements, and also having a dialogue. And also, there is this aspect in the ICC side as well. Who we're going to be summoning, and what, whether all this serving of justice will be done there, because in Korea there is also about opinions that summoning to the ICC, then doesn't that also infringe the sovereignty of South Korea as a nation as well in terms of delivering the justice? So in that kind of sense, up to what level and who will be going to the ICC to get served the justice, but also in Korea who's going to be sent to Korea, South Korea, to be served the justice. I think all those kind of aspects needs to be talked about. But yeah, due to time constraint, I'll stop there.
그레이 교수님께서 사실은 가장 이 핵심적인 고민과 질문을 해주셨다고 저는 코멘트를 해주셨다고 생각을 합니다. 8.15 경축사에서 대통령께서 이제 북한 주민이 이 통일을 열망하도록 변화를 촉진하는 문제와 그다음에 이제 그럼에도 불구하고 남북 문제를 풀어가기 위해서는 당국 간에 또 이 대화가 동시에 진행돼야 되기 때문에 대화실무 협의체 제안도 동시에 한 건데, 다만 이제 교수님께서 이 코멘트 하셨듯이 이 북한 주민에 대한 변화를 위한 어떤 전략과 남북 대화를 추진하는 전략 사이에 긴장 관계가 분명히 있을 수밖에 없을 것 같습니다. 북한 당국의 입장에서는 제가 이 설명을 했듯이 인권 문제나 북한 주민의 변화 문제를 정권 안보, 체제 안보 문제로 보고 있기 때문이죠.
So I think, Kevin, that I think that issue that you raised is very, very important. It's one of the very, very important bits. So basically, our presidents in South Korea, when they talked about the commemorative speech on the Liberation Day and on the 15th of August, he talked about the change. About bringing in change and so on, and also whilst that is happening, there is another side of it, which at the same time, this kind of like the dialogue between these two countries, the two governments, and I think there is this strategy of changing, bringing change to the North Korean residents, and also this. Strategy of a dialogue between the North and South. There is always going to be the tension between these two strategies. But as I explained, there is this difficulty that the North Korean government at the moment is linking these kind of like human rights issues as well as change issue around these change to their direct, kind of connection to their national security. So I think that is the difficult bit.
그렇기 때문에 그 두 가지의 어떤 긴장 관계를 어떻게 현실적으로 풀어갈까라는 정교한 전략 수립이 필요할 것 같고요. 두 번째는 어제 에버라드 대사님이 말씀하신 것 같긴 한데, 북한 내에서 이런 위협들이 본인들한테 어떤 상당히 기득권을 상실하지 않는다는 어떤 인식을 심어줄 수 있는 방향의 어떤 중간 그룹들을 만들어내는 것도 하나의 방식일 것 같고요.
So and also things about having this kind of tense relationship between these two strategies. How we're gonna be realistic and come up with a bit more realistic kind of a resolution between those two. And I think that we need like a strategy around that. And also I think it was John Everett mentioned it. I think also we just. There is this. I think we need to make this kind of like a middle ground group, that this kind of like the threat on the regime will not lead to a loss of their kind of authority or their kind of like vested rights. I think that is like something in between that kind of that group. So yeah, something that we need to form that as well.
현재 이제 북한 김정은이 이제 교전 중인 두 적대 국가 관계론으로 대남 정책을 본질적으로 전환을 이제 추진하는 과정에 있기 때문에 당분간 남북 대화는 쉽지 않을 겁니다.
However, now because the Kim Jong-un actually mentioning about the adversarial kind of relationship between the two countries, and so all this direction of their policy towards South Korea is actually going towards that. Under that kind of situation, I think at the moment the dialogue will be difficult.
그런데 이제 그 그레이 교수님께서도 언급했듯이 트럼프 행정부가 새롭게 이제 1월 달이면 출범할 것이고 그런 출범 이후에 정책 조정 과정을 거쳐서 러시아 우크라이나 전쟁의 종전 가능성도 있고 또 러북 관계의 변화 가능성도 있을 수밖에 없는 것이고 또 그 과정에서 미중 관계가 조정되고 중국의 입장도 일정 정도 정립되는 그런 다양한 한반도를 둘러싼 정세 변화가 있을 걸로 저는 봅니다.
And also as Kevin said, there's a new administration, the Trump administration, and from then there is going to be that kind of change in policy and amendment of policy, and there is that kind of also even a possibility of end of war in the Ukraine, within all that there's also the redefinition of the relation between America and China, so there's a lot of kind of like change in politics around this Korean peninsula.
한국이 갖고 있는 어떤 면은 그 전략적 강점도 있고 또 한국이 그동안에 이제 키워온 국력도 있기 때문에 이러한 그 전략적 그 강점과 우리의 국력을 적절히 활용을 해서 이러한 국제 정세 변화 속에서 저희 남북 문제를 풀어갈 수 있는 주도적인 어떤 환경을 우리 정부도 조성해 갈 수 있을 거라고 저는 봅니다. 그런 과정에서 저희 남북 대화도 풀고 이런 현실적인 어떤 그런 대안들도 마련해 볼 수 있지 않을까 저는 그렇게 생각합니다.
And also, South Korea also has this strength in terms of within that South Korea has this kind of a strategical kind of advantage of that it's right in the middle there, and also there we have our own kind of the power as a country. So I think this power as a country as well as our strategical advantage, I think our government will be able to lead. To resolve this issue, especially under this kind of like a lot of change of the politics around the peninsula, and I think within that the dialogue, the issue about the dialogue and all that will be also all of them will be addressed.
Okay, we have very little time remaining,
Okay.
and I'm going to ask each of our panelists, our respondents, to say one primary thing that they would like to highlight about the implications of the North Korean presence in Russia in terms of our wider discussion, and so that we can also hopefully get maybe a couple of questions from the audience. I do apologize. Obviously, with the pressures of time and translation, we've not been able to perhaps be as interactive as I would have liked, but John, would you like to start?
Very briefly, if you're looking for human rights objections to the North Korean deployment in Russia, you will get nowhere. They are there within Russia's internationally recognized boundaries under the terms of a formal treaty between the two countries. If you object to that, then the legality of, for example, the United States deployment to the Republic of Korea also comes into question. Don't go there. If you are looking for something under international law with which to object, go for the Geneva Conventions. The DPRK is a state party to the conventions, including to the first protocol. Or, given that it's a racing certainty that the North Koreans will at some point start laying landmines, the CCW, to which the North Koreans are not party, the Russians are. And if you discover landmines laid by the North Koreans, then you can start to object quite fiercely.
Yeah, use this to open doors. To open doors about, frankly speaking, institutions, officials who couldn't care less about North Korea, but now care about North Korea because they have been told by their own governments that they have to care about North Korea. So I think this is the only silver lining I see from North Korea supporting Russia in this way is that you are going to be able to reach out to many people who until now wouldn't have found the time to talk to you. And related to this, the point that not only this event that you have here, but your government has been organizing events across different places, bringing this angle in also makes it more personal. I mean, you have here a very good, right? All of you can see this, right? Several testimonies that make what you have been talking about very personal. I've seen for many people across Europe, Russia supporting North Korea supporting Russia in this way has made it personal, right? Because they feel that the war in Ukraine is something personal that touches all Europeans, not only those in Ukraine. So that helps you tremendously.
Just very briefly about the broader issue of North Korean troops in Russia. I mean, one thing that's not been mentioned, I don't think is discussed enough, is the issue of China. And I think that China's position is very interesting in all of this. I think talk of an axis of Russia, North Korea, China, Iran is a bit misplaced, because we're not looking actually, it seems to be reproducing all the problems we had with Cold War analysis, assuming that all these bloc countries were actually on the same page. But I think China has been put in a very awkward position by all of this, because China is somewhat unique, because it's both of that camp, but it's also fully integrated into the West. I think the South Korea, the current Yoon administration has probably would be wise to kind of readjust its stance towards China to adopt something a little bit more balanced, I think. And I think there are signs that that may be happening. Actually, there's been a recent summit between, or I should say, meeting on the edges of the APEC summit between Xi Jinping and Yoon Suk-yeol, and there's been changes in the visa policy towards South Koreans as well. But I think because China is, I mean, China's said absolutely nothing about this, right? I mean, you look through the Chinese media, there's no mention of North Korean troops in Russia, so which I think in itself just suggests that it's in quite an uncomfortable position about all of this, because depending on what the response is, this could deepen all those things that China doesn't want, increase militarization of East Asia, South Korean nuclear weapons, all these kind of things. But I think South Korea may be able to use this opportunity to I mean, it's not going to get China on board with the human rights issue, but in terms of sort of trying to engage a bit more and have some impact on the Russia-North Korea relationship, I think there's some potential there. But yeah, I'll finish there.
So three, I mean, I think really helpful observations. If there is someone who has a burning question from the floor that they would like to direct to any of our panelists, I want to give you this chance, but as you can see with the clock against us, we're not really going to be able to have much opportunity. But right at the very back, we'll take you two, and one question here. And if you can keep your question really short, limited to one straightforward question. And Peter, can you take the mic? Thank you.
Thank you so much for a very interesting topic. My name is Yoon Walker. I'm a PhD student at the SOAS University of London. So my question is, what's the focus on discourse surrounding the human rights violation in North Korea? Does the South Korean government actually sincerely care for the sake of North Koreans? Or do they believe it helps actually the reunification, or is it more to condemn the North Korean regime? Thank you.
Next question. Just behind, yeah.
I'm going to pick one of the shorter questions I've got written down, because I've got quite a few. One of them was quite long and multi-layered, but this has got to do with the UPR process. Earlier we mentioned about the UPR process in North Korea. I'm currently working on a UPR process for an international NGO on Honduras. So I just wanted to ask, with regards to civil society organizations, how can we get DPRK citizens' perspectives on human rights abuses to more effectively hold the North Korean state to account?
Okay, and then the last question, right at the front. Just wait for the mic, please, Michael. Yeah, it's coming.
So it's really partly an appeal to you, John, that I wondered if we could have sometime a session on the areas of common ground between North Korea and South Korea, because I spent 10 years studying the two Koreas, and the areas of common ground are huge, but you have to really search to get the information on North Korea. So what is their system of corporate governance in North Korea? What are the differences in the health system, and why do they have roughly the similar outcomes in terms of life expectancy? What are the similarities in the systems of education? I mean, there are huge overlaps because Koreans somehow are similar in North Korea and South Korea. They have certain patterns of thinking that go back 5,000 years and certain underlying values that they share for 5,000 years as well. So could we have perhaps a greater stress next time on looking at where those overlaps lie? That would be the first point. And I am just going to say one more sentence, which is just, there is a question of who defines human rights. And we don't tend to look at the situation of the elderly in detail, but I wonder whether the human rights quotes of the elderly in North Korea may be better served than the human rights in quotes of many in South Korea in terms of their welfare, in terms of ordinary human day-to-day health and types of issues. So I want to leave it there just to say, having done all of this work and written it up, I am convinced that there is a lot of potential for North and South Korea to have very productive conversations about their shared values and shared common ground.
Okay. I'm going to invite any members of the panel who would like to comment, but there's no obligation to comment.
Okay. Very brief. Yes, they have a lot in common, but they're still not talking. Is the South Korean government using human rights just to attack North Korea? No, I don't think so. I think this is a legitimate concern, and I don't think this is part of a kind of a strategy of dissonance. It is self-standing.
Yeah, I agree with this point. I think there's a genuine concern about the rights of fellow Koreans at the end of the day, right? Divided by the 30th parallel, of course. So I don't think it's hypocritical of the South Korean government to raise this. I think there's genuine belief that this is something that needs to be discussed. I agree with that point.
I agree.
Okay, excellent. And then, would either of you like to comment? Very short.
그 인권은 목적과 수단화되는 것은 아닙니다. 우리가 북한 주민의 인권을 개선하는 것 자체가 목적이고요. 근데 그건 보편성이고 한반도가 분단되어 있기 때문에 북한 주민의 인권이 개선되면 그것이 통일에 긍정적인 여건을 조성한다. 이런 차원에서 이해하시면 좋겠습니다.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, in terms of the human rights, I think it's not about ends becoming the means. You know, like it's not trying to, it's actually generically, to have the improvement. That is the biggest aim. And I think, but I think the best way to put this is because if this improvement, these improvement can have a positive effect on the unification. I think that's the best way to put it.
그 마지막 세 번째 것에 대해서만 간단히 말씀드리면 그 노인들의 인권 복지에 대해서 질문해 주셨는데 북한에는 연로자 보호법이라는 법이 있고요. 남자의 경우는 60세 여자들은 55세가 되면 그게 연로연금을 주게 되어 있습니다. 제도적으로는 잘 되어 있는 거죠. 근데 실제 주는 금액은 뭐 한 북한 돈 700원, 800원 한 끼 식사할 돈도 안 됩니다. 그래서 제도적으로는 잘 되어 있지만 실제로는 현실에 있어서 이행은 잘 안 되고 있다. 그 정도로 말씀을 드리겠습니다.
And also, the last one about the elderly rights and the welfare. There is the Elderly Protection Act, for males over the age of 60 and female over the age of 55, you get pensions for the elderly pension. I mean, they've got the system there. It's a good system. However, the actual the execution of it is not so much because what you get is 한 끼가 한 달에 받는 겁니까? 그게 한 달에 한 번?
700원, 800원 주게 되는데 몇 달씩 모아서 주기도 하고 그랬습니다.
한번 식사입니다.
So what you get like over a period of several months is pretty much equivalent to just the one meal over the few months. So in terms of execution of it, it's very poor. So I think the reality, so the system's there, but the reality is not so much as as the system. Yeah.
So thank you. We have had a fascinating and wide-ranging discussion. What I take away from this is that we obviously need to be conscious of the gravity of the human rights situation in the DPRK, but context is everything, as we heard, I think, from particularly our respondents. And the context, which obviously is troubling in the sense that there are broader international security concerns. will hopefully provide an opportunity for more awareness of the challenge of dealing with the DPRK. That's an imperfect conclusion, but it does seem to reflect the discussion we had. I want to thank our delegation from Kinu for coming such a long way and sharing their views. Similarly, I want to thank our respondents for giving their time and expert opinion. I want to thank the translator for his indefatigableness. And I want to thank you, the audience, for your patience. I did say that we were going to have a Q&A session, but unfortunately it was much shorter than I expected. But thank you all for coming. And stay tuned, there will be more events on Korea, whether at Darwin or at the Center for Geopolitics. Thank you very much.